What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a Lego explosion just like this and how to light it up. This is the kind of explosion I'm going to be showing you how to make in this video. This is the most basic version that I make, and I've used it in a couple of mocks, and I plan on using it for Utapau as well. It's pretty easy to make. There aren't a ton of different kinds of pieces. The most important thing, in my opinion, when building explosions is not necessarily what kind of piece you use, but what kind of shape you're making with those pieces. Because I've seen all different kinds of pieces used. They're all trying to capture the kind of the same similar shape of like a funnel kind of moving upward at the base of the explosion, and then as you get higher up, flames, people, debris are starting to fan outward the higher you get. This is by no means the best explosion tutorial out there. In fact, this is something I would really like to improve on. I'm just showing you guys what I currently use just in case you want to use something similar for your mocks. So I'm going to start first with the center of the explosion. What I like to use are just a couple of these Lego flame pieces with the little nubs on the end. You can see those. There's one right there, and then one right there, and then a trans orange cone. So I just stick that at the center of the explosion, and then I just kind of build on this same general shape. You can see it's kind of like an arch. This is the same shape I'm going to be using for the rest of the pieces, so you're going to want to build basically the same thing again, hooking these fire pieces together to create almost a half arch. The way I stick these fire pieces together is pretty simple. So you take two pieces, and I like to use this little knot, this little groove right here, and you take one of the little studs from the second flame piece and you just connect it into that little groove right there, and you can see you can change the angle, you can change the direction, you can even have the flame running a different direction from the first one to create all different kinds of shapes and angles. So I've done that here with a couple different pieces. You can see I've got 3 pieces of flame on each one, and then from there I kind of just place them however I want, and I kind of just try to gauge how they look, because I want to create, like I was talking about earlier, that funnel at the base and then have it fan outwards the higher it gets. At this point, there are a couple of very important things to note. The first is when placing your 4 base flame pieces, you don't want them all to be the same height. So what I like to do is put some studs underneath some of them. I put 1 stud underneath this one's going to have 2, and then these 2 don't have any. You're going to want to do this to create different heights, because you don't want your explosion to look super symmetrical, because that's going to look fake. You want it to look natural, uneven, explosive. You're going to want to do the same thing with the arches. You don't want each of these flame pieces to look the exact same. So even though some of these do have the same amount of flame pieces, they're bent at different angles and twisted in different directions. This kind of gives it that chaotic feeling of an explosion. So now we've kind of got that basic shape of the explosion down. You can see that funnel moving up and then starting to fan outwards. Now what I want to do is start to put little smaller details around the edges, and I like to use these little flame pieces with a trans orange cone, and I just stick these at random points around the explosion, so that once again you're breaking up that bottom area and making it look less symmetrical and a little bit more chaotic. Alright, I'm pretty much finished with the explosion itself. I kind of like the direction everything's going. Sometimes I'll tweak them a little bit to make sure I don't have a bunch of them pointing the same direction. You want to have as many different directions as possible. This will help make the explosion look larger than it actually is, and you'll also have more options for placing minifigures and debris, which we're going to tackle next. Now that the explosion's done, we're going to start to add a little bit of life to it. So one thing I really like to do is include bits of the terrain that the explosion is on. So take, for example, if this were for Utapau, I would be using a lot of dark tan and olive green on the build. So what I'm going to want to do is just randomly place bits of dark tan and olive green in the explosion. This will help make it look like, actual dirt and debris is flying up in the air. Alright, now that I've got all of that in, we can now place the minifigure. So the cool thing about these flame pieces being hooked together is they're actually pretty sturdy. Now you can stick the hollow end of a minifigure foot on the end of the flame piece, kind of wherever you want your minifigure to be placed. Now you can make it look like this explosion went off just in front of this commando and he's being sent flying backwards. The explosion's starting to look pretty good, but we're still not done, and I'm going to remove this minifigure for the last part. The last part is going to be the terrain. I like to build, when possible, the explosion down into the ground, because if you have these trans orange cylinders just sticking straight up out of the terrain, it makes it look kind of weird, because an explosion explodes right from the ground. It doesn't like come up 6 inches and then explode. So we're going to try and build this into the terrain. So what I'm going to start doing is building a frame of plate around the explosion, and Again, for this scenario, I'm going to be building on the planet of Utapau, so I'm using dark tan and olive green. The terrain is finished, and here is the one thing I really like about these kinds of explosions is there's no real cool, like amazing technique on display here. It's really just a combination of really small, important techniques, and that is making sure your explosion is shaped correctly, making sure you've got the right kind of debris in the explosion, and making sure you build around the explosion with the terrain to make sure it looks like it really is a part of the terrain and complements it. To light up the explosion, I'm going to do basically the same thing I did in the tutorial. We're going to start by building the explosion, and to start, we're going to lay down the wiring first because that's going to be underneath everything. I'm just using these single LED lights from Light My Bricks. They're very useful and I've really enjoyed working with them. So the first thing you're going to want to do is hold the LED light down and then stick a stud over the top so it won't, go flopping around and escape. All right, I've got the two wires in place. I'm not really going to worry about hiding the wires because this is mostly focusing on the explosion. But you see I got them both lit up and they make a pretty nice glow so far. All right, I've got the explosion all rebuilt and in place. What I'm going to do now is just add that terrain detailing around the side to kind of bury a little bit of the explosion, and then we'll test out the lights. I've got the terrain placed down, I've got the little bits of debris, and then I've got the clone trooper flying off the back. Let's see how it looks all lit up. You guys can see lighting up your explosions really does add a lot. It looks a little hazy in the camera, but like looking at it in person, it looks amazing. I'm really happy with how it looks, and I'll definitely be doing this technique more in future mocks. Lighting up your explosions also looks really cool when you turn the lights off and look at them in the dark. Well, that wraps up this tutorial video, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope this helps show you guys a cool way to make some Lego explosions. If you have any other techniques or things you would like me to do in a tutorial style video, make sure to let me know down below in the comments, as well as let me know what you think of my explosion technique. And as always, if you liked the video, don't forget to leave me a big thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing so you won't miss out on any future content. But until next time, happy building.